Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I want to ask very immediately, who here has seen this emoji? Who has used this emoji? Who has received this emoji? I think we're all very familiar with this emoji, right? This, in the context of our world, stands for looks good to me. But does it actually look good? Because in our world, that has kind of developed into a negative connotation. Sometimes when we receive this emoji, it's a little too fast. Other times when we give this emoji, it's like, let's just get it over with. Let's go. Let's get it through. So depending where you are on the spectrum of receiving this, you could either go, yes, my pull request or merge request or code request or whatever you want to call it has been approved. Or you go, it's a little too quick, but maybe I can get my work done and we can move on with our day. And eventually you get to this stage where when you see this emoji, without warrant or without reason why you're receiving it, it becomes a problem. So today I want to talk to you about this very particular problem. It's very important. Code reviews. I want to tell you all what we are doing wrong. I want to tell you how to fix all of those wrong things. And I want to tell you how to go beyond just the bare minimum, because everything that we're doing wrong and how we fix those are what I consider to be bare minimum code reviews. And after that, we'll tie it all back together to DORA Metrics. So, what are we doing wrong with code reviews? I'm just having you think about it because I know one or two things are popping up in your heads already. There are plenty of things, but we have to look at this through a particular lens. Specifically, we have to look through it through a reviewer or someone who looks at the code before letting it go through the rest of the process. And we have to look at it through an author lens, the person who prepares the pull request or code request, the one who says, here, go look at my code changes to make sure everything is okay. So we'll start with the reviewer. So, number one thing, we are not leaving our ego at the door as a reviewer. Whether we're a senior developer, or we are a JavaScript expert, or we know Ansible like the back of our hand, or we've been doing this for 20 years, sometimes we let that get to us. Sometimes we say, oh, if I'm reviewing a junior developer's code, I need to give it a more scrutinous eye versus someone who is also a peer or a senior, and that's absolutely wrong. Which leads to this thing, focusing on the developer rather than the code. A lot of times when we look at the code that is being changed, sometimes we let who the person is influence the way that we review that code. And this is something that maybe we don't do it on purpose, but sometimes it does come through in the review, whether that's how we write our comments or all the little things that we possibly nitpick in the review itself. In a study on code reviews, where they were detecting interpersonal conflict between people in issues in code review, they actually found that the use of second-person pronouns at the beginning of a sentence means that you're more likely to be impolite. So when you look at this in a comment, this means when you say, you da-da-da-da-da, you did X, Y, and Z, you decided not to do this, you did this in this particular function. What this tells us is that instead of focusing on the code and bringing the person into the review, the person who's receiving this comment is more likely to take it as an impolite comment. The next thing is skimming through reviews. So remember when I said we give this emoji very, very quickly. The one thing that we do as reviewers is we have a bunch left, or we're the only ones who are reviewing all of the PRs. We are the ones who are bottlenecking our team. We are the ones that we have a lot to get through, and code reviews are just one more thing, one more to-do that we need to check off. And so sometimes we don't really give it the proper due diligence that it needs. What is the point of the process if we're not going to go through it and look through it meticulously? Other reasons, which are not our own fault, are that sometimes the review is not manageable. Sometimes we receive gargantuan PRs that are 500 files or 1,000 lines change, and it's impossible for any person to review it properly. But nevertheless, whatever those reasons are, this is a problem as a reviewer. We tend to skim through those reviews. The thing is, when we skim through those reviews and we approve it and we let it go through and it gets past our guard, we tend to always go through this type of mindset, which is the developer has a bug in their code. It is their fault. And maybe not so much here in this audience, because I know we don't want to have a blameful culture. We want to be psychologically safe to make mistakes. But I know in other audiences where there are more developers who have this on their team, it's very much a thing. We blame the developer, especially on smaller teams where it's developers and QA testers. They kind of rely on QA testers to find their problems, and if they don't catch it, they blame them. So the thing is, this shouldn't be the mindset. The mindset should be, how did I miss that? Anything that is going through our review is still our responsibility. It's not blame the developer, it's how did it go through my review and how did it actually get past my reviewing skill set. And another thing, writing ineffective comments. So, whenever I give this talk, people are like, oh, that means you can't give any kind of bad feedback at all, or you can't write constructive criticism. And that's absolutely not what it is. You can write constructive criticism without being a jerk. There's a difference there. So instead of giving feedback that is terrible for the author to receive or kind of hides what it is that you're trying to say, we just tend to write ineffective comments. So when we write ineffective comments, they fall in line with these things. They're subjective, so return the result in array instead. Why? Why do I need to return it in an array? What is the reasoning for me to give you this function in this way? Sometimes they're unclear. This could be better. Okay, sure. Let's talk about it. Why could it be better? Tell me why it's going to be better. Or they lack an outcome, right? I think there's something wrong here. And they don't go further. So these are the things that not only are frustrating to receive as an author, but they are also ways that prolong the code review process, because now you get into a conversation, now you go back and forth, now you are lost in translation. If you just wrote an effective comment, maybe the conversation could be more productive. And so just as a quick review, these are all the things that I think most important we are doing wrong as a reviewer. We don't leave our ego at the door. We focus on the developer rather than the code. We skim through reviews, and we write ineffective comments. So we talked about the reviewer. There's a lot that the author is doing wrong as well. So let's go through those. The first thing is not being your own first reviewer. I can't tell you how many times where I am reviewing someone's code and they have missed something small. They forgot to add the ticket number, they have a really bad commit message, it's unclear, the description is empty. You're not being your own first reviewer, and thus you miss a lot of these little things that should be there when you prepare the pull request or the code request that you're preparing for the reviewer. So by not being your own first reviewer, you're really setting up the reviewer not for success. You are not using any automation during development. So I don't know about you, but have you ever received a comment on your code review talking about indentation or spacing or line spaces between logic and line breaks at all? No? Really? Okay, we're all automated then. Everyone is fully automated. Nobody talks about formatting or styling in their code reviews. I want to be you when I grow up. So this is a big problem in other audiences that are not as elevated as you all, but something that needs to be reminded through a lot of these people, a lot of these developers, is that they need to use this automation. They need to not talk about spacing or indentation or spaces between logic or whatever it is that your team has decided to be in your style guide. Do that all during development, not during the code review. Linting, formatting, static analysis, testing. These are all tools that we can use as developers, being a software developer myself, that we need to be using more often, more proactively, rather than just letting the code review be the guard to catch it all. So, making your PRs unmanageable. So there are a lot of things that make a PR unmanageable. I hinted at one before. Who has seen this? Who agrees? And it's very, very true. It's unfortunate, but it's true. The more lines there are, the less likely we're going to give it a proper review. The less likely we're going to go through it meticulously, do diligently, and the more likely we're going to skim that review. So making them unmanageable means we are putting too many files in there. There are changes that are unrelated, bumping up that file size. There are configuration files that shouldn't be in there. There are too many changes that are in there in a single PR. We need to be breaking those apart. Changes aren't atomic. So if you want smaller PRs, the changes that you're working on need to be smaller. It's as simple as that. Well, Adrienne, how do you break a feature that is not small enough? Well, you need to go back to your design phase or your planning phase or wherever it is that you're planning out what you are going to do, and you need to make those smaller. Those are things that are creeping up and you don't find until the last minute when the PR is too large and you have 1,000 lines of code that you need to review, but someone says, oh, but this is one feature. You need to go back and break that feature apart. Or multiple parts of a large feature are in a single PR. So the smaller that you can make them, the more atomic that you can make them, the smaller it is the thing that you have to review, and the more manageable and likely it is that you're going to give it a proper review. Finally, treating PRs as a burden. So it takes a lot of work to prepare a PR that sets you up for success, the reviewer. We need to have a descriptive title. We need to add the description. What is the context with which this change is happening? It's easy, just like code comments, to repeat what is happening in the code, but tell me why. Why is this happening? Why did you choose to implement it in such a way? In the same way in a code review, when you put this up for a review, why are we making this change? What is this related to? What discussions happened that led to this point? Those are the things that I, as a reviewer, want to know about and can put my mindset better for this review to review it in a more proper context. The more that you can not treat your PR as a burden and put as much context as possible for your reviewer, the more successful they're going to be in giving it a proper review. Because otherwise, we're left with a PR like this. I've seen this too many times. Bug fix. For what? No description, nothing linked, no work ticket that says that this is even a thing. You're on your own. And finally, tying your worth to your code. So a lot of us, when we get paid a lot, or we enjoy doing this, or we label ourselves as software developers, we really tie a part of our identity to this role. And so, of course, anytime we receive any kind of constructive feedback on it, we kind of sometimes feel attacked, like, oh, you should have done it better, or you should have been smarter, you should have been more clever, you should have been this. We need to not tie ourselves to our code, just like we expect the reviewer not to focus on us as a developer, but rather the code that we are writing. We need to keep this same advice in mind. Don't tie your self-worth to your code. It's as simple as that. Focus on the constructive feedback. That is your code. Improve it. And so those are all the things that we are doing wrong as an author. We're not being our own first reviewer. We're making our PRs unmanageable. We're not using any automation. This audience is using automation during development. We are treating PRs as a burden, and we are tying our worth to our code. So how do we fix all of those things? Those are a lot of things. So let's start with the review. Forget your ego, number one. This is going to apply to everybody. Forget your ego, take it out, just leave it at the door. Focus on the code, not on the developer. If the developer and you are having some sort of argument, that doesn't matter. That's another thing to take care of. But at the time in the PR, don't bring that in. Focus on the code that is in front of you as it is standing. So back in that paper where it says it was researching interpersonal conflict and issues in code, we see many software engineering related engrams, tests, the pull request among toxic comments, but almost none among non-toxic comments, but almost none among toxic comments, which reiterates what we were saying earlier, which is if you focus on the pull request, if you focus on the code, if you focus on the technical aspects and you find those words related, they found that those were more likely to be labeled non-toxic than if you were to talk about the person using those second person pronouns. So focus on the code. When you write a comment, ask yourself, do you mention that person a bit more than the code? Is the overall feeling a bit more combative, commanding, or passive-aggressive? Does the comment add value? Will it delve into, or will it drive productive discussions? Can any parts of your comment be lost in translation, misconstrued, or not apply? And does the comment contribute to overall developer happiness? These are the things that you need to ask yourself when you are going through it. Proper, thorough reviews as a reviewer. Review code in 25 to 45 minute focus bursts. I don't know about you, but if you do anything more than an hour, unless you really, really enjoy it, you tend to lose focus. You're not as focused on what it is you're doing at hand. So the more you can break up those chunks and take care of yourself, the more likely you can do a proper review in these shorter amounts of time. Don't be afraid to send PRs that are way too large to review. Go ask the author, hey, there's way too many things in here. I need you to break it up into smaller PRs. Help them pick it out, use Git cherry pick if it is able to be done that way. Otherwise, go back to your design or planning phase and try to aim towards smaller features so that you don't have to break these apart later on. Do what's necessary to obtain the full context of the code changes. If that requires an offline conversation, do so. Sometimes we kind of get lost and we don't know when to take the conversation offline. We go through and there's just a really long discussion and you're trying to make sense of each other online. If you have 3 or 4 comments in and you're just going like this with what you're trying to say to each other, take a moment to just have a conversation offline. And sometimes that can be much quicker than trying to resolve it online. And then write effective comments. So this is one of my favorite things. Effective comments to me are objective, they're as specific as possible, and they have a focused outcome. And as reviewers, we need to be objective. Suggest with facts. So if you're going to suggest something, an alternate implementation, something could be done here, something doesn't seem right here, give me those thoughts, add those things, give me that context as to why you're saying what it is that you are saying. Before you ask for a change, so if you're now saying something needs to be done, extra work needs to be redone, then ask yourself, why do you want to make that change? And this does a couple things. First, when you ask yourself what it is that why you're making this request, you can better articulate why you are making that request. And second, through this personal introspection, you can kind of decide within yourself, oh, you know what, this actually does not need to be done. We can do this some point later on. Or you go ahead and realize that there's actually more work that needs to be done. So please ask yourself beforehand, because the mental, not gymnastics, but thinking about it yourself, you're able to better articulate what it is that you need from the author. And then target the code as presented to you. Don't bring any ancillary things outside unless it is related to the changes, but target the code as it was presented to you. Be clear if something needs to be done. So who here has used nitpick comment signals as a reviewer? Nobody? I see 1 person, 2, 3. Okay. We should be doing more of those, finally, something this audience doesn't do. So, comment signals, nitpicks. Sometimes you bring up something as a reviewer and you sometimes label them as a nitpick, meaning the author doesn't have to do something about it. This is just your own personal preference, personal style. You just had to say something about it. Usually you don't even write these in a code review, but other times, if you must add them, you be sure to label them as a nitpick. So there are a couple other things that you can do there, which is needs change or needs rework. Let's discuss offline. Because sometimes as an author receiving comments, anytime I receive comments on a code review, I associate that there's work to be done with a comment. And sometimes that's not the case. So immediately seeing that there is or isn't work that needs to be done related to a comment that you are writing, the better for the author. Pinpoint what you're talking about. Only highlight the relevant code that you are discussing. Explicitly call out the method or the variable or the class names, highlight it if necessary, call it out in your comment, and then call out line numbers to be way more succinct. So most code review tools, you can highlight very specifically what it is that you're talking about. But in the chance that you don't, or it's a larger function or a larger set of lines that you need to discuss, call those things out to be more explicit. And then as reviewers, we need to provide a focused outcome. So in another paper where we looked at code review comments and how language matters in comments, we find that the most useful comments usually contain some sort of verb that denotes transformation. So rework, reorganize, move, rename. Anytime there's something that's to be done to the state of the code, they were typically labeled as more useful than comments that were not. And to help with this is something that I have called the triple R pattern. When you are writing something or when you are asking someone to make a change, there are 3 R's that you should be thinking of. What is the request? What is the rationale behind your request? And what is the result that you are asking for from the author? Request, there's a sentence explaining what it is that you want the author to do. Rationale, these are the facts. Why are you asking them to do this? What is the reasoning behind this request? Why are you asking them to make this change? And then finally, the result, a measurable end state that you're asking the author to have, whether that's an actual thing to compare against, a metric to achieve, an actual screenshot of what it's supposed to look like. Give them a very explicit end of what it is that you're asking for at the very end of this change. So the triple R pattern, or So for example, and we are running low on time, I'll go through one example, but please find me to talk about more. Let's say I want someone to move a method. So the request, please move the authenticate user method into our utilities library. Rationale, there are similar methods that we have, like this one, and we also use this a few times, so this warrants its place in the library. Lastly, our team working agreement advises us to put these kinds of methods in that particular library. Result, after this change, the authenticate user method should be in the authentication utilities library rather than stand alone. Split a feature, create a separate PR, same thing. Could you separate this? It makes it easier for me to review the PR. Result, I want sorting and filtering in 2 separate PRs. Or request a more meaningful variable name. I'm just going to skirt through that because people always are like, well, this is a good name. No, this is a good name. And then it devolves. Come find me. Or I actually have another talk about that, but we'll talk about that. So author, let's go through these. Whew. So to fix this, be your own first reviewer. Go through it before you give it and pass it and submit it to a reviewer. Better yet, if you have the use of draft PRs, use that and make sure your team uses drafts accordingly. Knowing that a draft is not in a ready state yet, knowing that you're still getting things together and putting it together makes it easier for both parties to understand that this is not a PR that is ready to review. Make PRs manageable, please, please. Focus on an atomic change or a feature. Include only what is necessary. So as you are going through and you're preparing it, stash away some stuff. Make sure to make it a really nice change that is just something you would be willing to review in 25 minutes. Split multiple parts into multiple reviews. And likely, these are things that can be reviewed within 10 to 20 minutes. Now, these are not hard and fast guidelines. If it's 21 minutes, they're like, oh, Adrienne said you can't do that. No, that's not what I'm talking about. These are just guidelines on which you can use to make them a little bit better, a little bit more manageable. And then based on one of these papers, actually a study by Dragan Stepanovic, he has found that typically under 500 lines of code are better. They have more engagement because you are able to properly go through them and thus leave more comments, not being more comments being a good thing, more comments being there's more engagement on your PR. And then based on a study on Microsoft, these are typically less than 20 files changed. Any more than that, there's way too much cognitive overload, there's too much to keep track of, and again, you can't give it a proper review. So these are just some guidelines to make manageable PRs. Author. Let the robots take over during development. You don't need to know about that because you do it already. Author. Prime your PRs, it's your job. So this is akin to making sure that we don't treat PRs as a burden. A lot of the times when I talk to software developers, they're like, oh, it's like unit tests, or it's like documentation. These are things that I don't like to do. It's not the fun part of the job. It's not the coding part of the job. Well, guess what? It is the job. Coding is a very, very small part of the job. Most of the time you're reading it, most of the time you're reviewing it, and a lot of the times you're putting up PRs for the rest of your team. You're not writing code for yourself. Usually, in a professional setting, you are usually writing code for someone else, your team, some other team. So treating PRs as your job, shifting that mindset to say, this is not a burden, but rather something I have to do, something that is part of software development, will do wonders for this particular part of the job. And there's a quote I like here from Yamamoto Tsunotomo. They write, when one is writing a letter, he should think that the recipient will make it into a hanging scroll. And that's how we have to think about PRs. The more context you can fill in that PR, the more that can serve as documentation, the better. There's way too much to go here, but pretty much if you are PR primed, that means you have a very descriptive PR title, you use labels, you use links, you have context in your description, you have commits that are also just as clear as your title. You basically add as much as possible for your reviewer to be successful. And remind yourself, you are not your code. So those are the bare minimum, right? Everything that I just listed is the bare minimum for code reviews. If you want to go beyond that, if you want to have much better code reviews, there are things like creating a team working agreement where you and your team sit down, put pen to paper, and actually write down what is our code review process? What happens when we have an emergency? How many reviewers does it take to approve a PR? What is our style guide? What is our naming convention? How do we name our variables? There are a lot of things that are just unspoken, that are implicitly believed on a team that would be much better off in an actual document, something like this, something that changes with the team, grows with the team, evolves with the team. So a team working agreement is something to consider. If possible, use PR templates. So to help authors make sure they don't forget anything, use something like a PR template to make sure they're checking off everything that they need to add before the PR is submitted for review. If possible, auto-assign reviewers. So there's something called a code owners file on GitHub, on other tools like Azure DevOps tools or Azure repos, and Amazon, I forget the Amazon one, but there are ways to auto-assign reviewers based on either the file directory or the extension of the file. Basically, anytime something has changed within that, it auto-assigns a particular person or a group to that PR. Explore informational reviewers. So for people who think only people who are able to approve a PR need to be on there, you're never going to level up the knowledge of the rest of your team. If you have juniors, if you have new people, add them as informational reviewers so that they can be aware of what is happening on your code base and also have some of that knowledge transfer over so that then they can be contributing members and then they can be approvers in the future. And finally, code compliments are encouraged within reason. If you see something really novel, if you find a very clever but readable way that someone has implemented something, say so. And then luckily, I have like 20 seconds left. The only thing I will say about DORA Metrics, this has been something that has made so many people upset. Don't let these metrics convince you to cut corners on code reviews. That's the only thing I will say about this. because people are using this to say we shouldn't do code reviews, or code reviews are hurting our metrics, when in the end, we shouldn't be using them to cut away from something that is part of the job. So, Tack, thank you so much for listening to me. I have so much more to say. This is all from my book. Please check it out. I love code reviews. I want to make it better for everybody. Please come talk to me about code reviews, and hopefully you have something from here today that will make it better for your own teams. Thank you.